Coach, thanks for joining me today for the Simple Coach to Coach interview. You're second. I mean, you're becoming a mainstay. So
Usually people don't have me back for a second anything, so I appreciate it.
yeah, seconds dinner. No, you don't get.
Yeah, right.
Anyhow, thank you. Thanks, I really
Thank
do
you.
appreciate it. Hey, the first question that I have. This is, I mean, all other questions pale to this one. How awesome was that assistant referee that you saw in that game? Wasn't he just stellar? Like, I mean, pegs above everybody.
It wasn't just his eye for the game, his fleet of foot, how quickly he was getting up and down the line was impressive. Not every AR is as fit as every other AR, and you know it when you see it, and I saw it that day. So if you ever get in touch with that guy, let him know that I would love to have him work some of our games.
Cool. Yeah, I might be able to make a call.
Okay.
That's great.
No, it was great seeing you.
Yeah, it was great seeing you. Like I was saying earlier, I for those who don't know, there were like three complexes. There's the main one that PDA was at, the two main ones, and then there was Rutgers, and then there was this one where we were
Iron
at
Peak.
Iron Peak. And I know because I did Saturday, I was at the main complex, and there was just gobs of coaches. Like, everyone looking at the same games, 70, 80 coaches all lined up, all looking at these games. And then Iron Peak, I wasn't expecting anybody because it was just a showcase for non-ECNL, I guess. I don't know
Yeah.
how that worked.
No,
But
that's it. Yeah.
and after the first game, I was thinking about like just sort of starting to put out a broad, do something on anti-social media and just say there are diamonds in the rough here. Like if you're looking for, this is the place to come, because otherwise, to me, it's great. That quality is great. But if everybody's competing over the same players, like how do you rise above that? But
No, for sure. Some of the
yeah,
best soccer and games I saw were at not just at PDA, but we're at
yeah,
Iron Peak, we're at Rutgers, and
Brett,
like
yeah,
you said, there's so much talent spread out, and it's not
hmm
to say that the ECNL doesn't exist for a reason. I understand it, but like you said, if you're one of two coaches or three coaches sitting on a sideline versus one of 25, there
yeah,
is a bit of potential to find someone that not everyone's seeing play live. So for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. All right, so let's jump right into this. Without me prompting, and I didn't ask you this on the sidelines, give me a sense of how you think your season went.
Uh, the further away from it you get, the more perspective you can take in. For
Hmm.
me personally, I was really proud of our team, and for the second year in a row, it was a really kind of shock and tough ending to the season. The closer you are to that ending, the harder it is for everybody, the coaches included, to really see the positives. We were in double overtime and 2 minutes from the game going to PKs, which isn't ideal, but still better than a loss. And we give up a ball at midfield. The girl takes it on a breakaway 60 yards and scores to lose in a semifinal at home for the second year in a row. So that part of it is awful. But when you go back to the season, another a lot of wins. Some of them could have been losses, but they were wins. We had a lot of games that were against really good teams. Some wins against teams that we typically don't beat. Finishing top two in the conference again was great. 7 all-conference players, 3 all-region players, our first ever women's soccer All-American. All of that, plus another successful year off the field academically. Some really good off-the-field connections. We had 11 new first-year players. We graduated
Wow.
11 from the year before. So a complete new personality group enters the team. And I thought our team chemistry was at its highest at the end of the year in a long time. So you take into perspective all of that, and you're really proud of how it went. But you always want more. Unless you're winning
Yeah.
that final game of the season, every coach wants more. So it's a long answer to a short question, but proud is the way I feel mostly for
Yeah.
our team.
Like I was saying, that day, like I thought you played some great soccer, like collectively. So yeah, just to reiterate your point, you went 14-5.
Mm-hmm.
You made it to the first round of the conference tournament, and then lost to Drew 1-0, who, like 3 days or 4 days before, you had beaten 1-0
At their place, yeah.
at their place. Yeah, and then you came back for the conference, and then you lost at home.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask like this. I mean, this obvious question, like I always like to do. What was the difference between the two games? Right? You go
Not
from
a lot.
wind, yeah,
Not a
yeah.
lot. I mean, the reason the first game was 1-0 and the shots were pretty even and the possession was pretty even is because they're good. Drew's a
Mm,
really good team. Krista's been there a really long time. She's one of the senior coaches in our conference. She's one of the senior coaches in our region, maybe even nationally. Someone I really respect. When I first came into coaching in the conference, one of the first people I really felt a connection to. She's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, and she had her team ready to play that season. That was the best Drew team we had seen in years. All season, anytime you watched them on film, you saw some immense talent. I think they had at least two, maybe three all-region players themselves. They had a lot of first-team all-conference.
yeah,
Sorry about that.
that's it.
Including including the coach's daughter, who was one of the better players on the field. But you know, the lights are brightest at home, right? Literally and figuratively, it's a night game. On the road, you're sort of in that grind mode still, right? It's like the season, and
Yeah,
then this postseason starts 3 days later. It's the same team. They didn't really change much, and threw a lot at us. There were some opportunities we thought to get after them on the counter to get at because they love playing attacking minded soccer. They throw numbers. They go a lot of like 2 and 3 in the back at times, which allows you to go ISO 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. And there were some opportunities for us to score. We had a goal that was called back on a corner kick. We scored maybe 25 minutes into the game. It was a bit of an odd call in my mind just for the physicality of that game. It was a
yeah,
really physical game. Drew's big and strong and aggressive, and we knew that going in. And you know how it goes in games.
yeah,
Early on, you can tell, is it going to be called close? Is it going to be called not so close? And it wasn't being called close, and all of a sudden we score a goal on, how corner kicks are. It's like a wrestling match in every single one.
yeah,
And our player got a great angle, and there were some hands, but there's hands on every corner kick. She
yeah,
heads it in the goal, and it wasn't even hesitation. He like blew his whistle right away. So that's that goal we had been getting all year.
yeah.
The first goal, and then we hold them off the board. That has been sort of our MO most of the season. It was our MO against them at their place the previous Saturday, and we didn't get it. We get all the way to overtime, and I'm sure you remember this call with me last year. The year previous, we go in the PKs. Both teams have 10 players take penalty kicks, and you just never, ever want to do that again because of the way it ended, and just it's disaster. And you're at home. You feel like you have better chances. You feel like so. We were a little chancy. We sent maybe one or two players forward on our corner kick than we should have. Sent a good ball in. Their defender, I think her name, oh man, I forget her name. It was either Jesse or it was Kevitt, Sam, but one of their two phenomenal center backs gets up, heads it clear. We play it back to our center back who's about to send a ball in. She takes one extra touch, and then their striker, who's just one of the best strikers in our conference, she strips her at midfield, and she takes it 60 yards, does the most professional rounding of a goalie ever, and just passes it in the open net, and that was it. 2 minutes left in the game.
Oh my gosh,
So,
heartbreaker.
completely deflating. And it took me weeks, and it took our team weeks to get over. But at the end of the day, they earned it. They deserved it. They didn't give up a goal, and we did. And when it's a sport like soccer, that's going to do it. So I could probably tell you every detail of that game, as you can tell, minute to minute. But if you had told me we were going to be 2 seed with a really successful season, and losing the first round, I would have said that's pretty shocking because I didn't think we were going to get to a 2 seed. Honestly, just the way our team makeup was going to be, some of the injuries we had earlier, and to
So
see
your
our players.
expectations were superseded. Like
It was
you
just
didn't.
we
Yeah,
had talent in some returners, but we were only returning 4 starters from the year before.
yeah,
And one of them was,
yeah,
like I said, an All American, but
yeah.
and 2 All Region players. But I was really proud of our team because as tough as it was, the attitude of seeing them all, not early in the morning on Monday, but throughout the day Monday, just cycling in to get their lifts in, to get their runs in. Like the off season started on Monday for them.
Yeah.
And there was an expectation, or at least a possibility, that we were going to get an at-large bid with our record and our strength of schedule. And the way I understand it, we were pretty close. So we were sort of trying to prepare for that without expecting it. And that was a tough day too when the selection show happened and we didn't get our name called, because I thought we had put together a resume and put ourselves in a position to have a chance at it, but it just didn't fall our way.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was going to ask you about that. I mean, have you been working on? And then I just saw your latest schedule, the 2023. Like, are you keep being more mindful of that in terms of how do you prepare? How do you build a body of work in a season so that you can get that?
It's for some teams it's a bit of a luck of the draw. Like there's years in which we think, okay, this team's been well over 500 for several years. They've been regionally ranked. Those are the kind of teams you need to have on your resume, plus some national ranked teams and teams that go deep into the tournament, so that at the end of the year when your resume is being measured against other teams, you either have wins or ties or even losses, but against high-level competition that are considered widely good. And we put some of those on in 2021, and some of those teams just didn't have the best years for themselves, as we've not had in the past. So our rankings weren't quite as high. This past year, we sort of went for broke a little bit. We played Misericordia, who, as I'm sure you know, is one of the best teams in the country. That was our first game of the year. And we played tough against them. They were definitely the better team. We lost 2-0. Mark's one of the best coaches in the country and had an amazing season. Actually, losing 2-0 at the end of the year, when you looked at what they did throughout the season,
That's not bad at all. Right?
And honestly, the 2 goals were phenomenal. Their girl Fasolino scored one, and then their outside back hit a
just
rocket.
a stunning ball player.
Yeah, they're just really good. And then we played Dickinson, who lost to Hopkins in the Centennial final. We actually beat Dickinson for the first time in our school's history, and that's a phenomenal program. Ted does an unbelievable job with them to be even with them, and we had a very late game win. It was one of the better wins we've had regular season in a long time from a team that's always competitive and always doing really good things, some really good players. Then we went down and played Christopher Newport, who was the reigning national champion. We played them and Virginia Wesleyan back-to-back in that tournament.
Let's make it an easy trip.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool experience. Those facilities, those coaches, are fantastic. Great. Their teams are phenomenal. Christopher Newport, reigning national champion. Virginia Wesleyan went to the Final Four. And even though we lost those 2 games, honestly, that Monday after those 2 games was when our team really figured out what we were made of, and we went on a real run after that, and had a really good run.
Until you played Scranton, you won. Except for Scranton, that you lost 1-0. Again, no slouch of a team.
No.
Like, you won every game at that point. You just went on a roll, literally.
It was one of those things, we didn't give up a goal for 11 straight games. Which
crazy.
And some of that was manifested in the way we shaped ourselves going into Christopher Newport. So we had a couple injuries, and on the bus on the way to Christopher Newport the morning of the match, we switched up our formation and went real heavy down the middle, clog it up, make them come after us, and we lost to them, but it was 2-1, and they scored with 2 minutes to go. So we saw, okay, if we can keep this team at bay, and then the next day we were tired, but I still thought we played Virginia Wesleyan really well. Let's stick with this, and that's a hard thing to do as a coach after 2 losses, no matter who your competition is, to try and stick with something.
Yeah.
And from there, and some of the teams we played in the mix throughout obviously weren't Christopher Newport, but I mean, to beat a team like York at their place, who I thought was phenomenal this year, Kelly's done an unbelievable job with that program. To have some of those wins, and really find yourself in the mix against good teams. Lycoming had a really good year this past year, and to beat them at their place. So it's hard to measure your success while you're in it.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of the year and you're like, okay, there was a lot there that we did well. And it was good.
This is recorded, and this is the boss's question. How would you assess your coaching this year?
Not as good as it should have been. I think, especially in the final 3 or 4 games of the season. I think I've said this to you before, and I forget who I'm quoting when I say this. It's a famous coach, probably Lombardi or something. But the hardest thing to do is, when you're in a tough game, to change what got you to the tough game, because it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
So for the last 3 or 4 games of the year, the goals were really drying up. We weren't like a high scoring team all year, but we were getting 2 and 3 goals against teams. Then as you start getting to the end, it's like, okay, we're playing this very specific shape that's unique, that not a lot of teams play against, and we're still getting goals out of it. The goals aren't working. Now's when you need to start changing it, right? But you're on an 11-game winning streak, 11-game shutout streak. You make that one change, and like 8 minutes into the game, you pick up a goal. That's a little bit of coaching with fear, which I'm really against, and I should know better by now. But you also want to trust that your team can figure it out on their own. You don't want to overcoach them. Like, okay, why? Don't fix it if it's not broken, that kind of thing. But I think there's a part of me that wishes I'd done a little bit more analyzation and looked back and been like, okay, yeah, we're not giving up goals, and we've won a couple of games, but is this replicable when you get scored on? Right? Like when you give up a goal, are you going to be able to score one in return? Because you haven't had to. For 11 straight games, we didn't have to come from behind.
Yeah.
And you're not preparing your team for that. If you're not, no matter what you simulate in practice, no matter what you do. So that's where the Scranton game was really helpful for us. We felt tough after that game because we played as well a half as we've played against them. They've been the creme de la creme of our conference for years and
just
nationally ranked. Colleen's done an incredible job getting them ready for the tournament every year. And to lose that game 1-0, and they cleared one off the line late on a corner kick we probably didn't deserve to get, but I would have taken the goal for a tie. I thought we battled back and played well in that game. But after that game, I really should have sat down with my assistant coaches and just broke down some film and said, we got to tinker with a couple other formation tweaks going in, even though I thought we played well. Just because I think that's the due diligence that some coaches owe their teams. And I don't think I performed. And I think the game against Drew was a product of that, Not that we should have changed anything, not that we still couldn't have won playing the way we played all year, but not having that second pitch, I felt responsible for that. And I felt, I gave Drew a lot of credit because they kind of knew it. They were like, if we score on this team, they haven't had to come from behind in a while. And when they have, they haven't been able to do it. And I give them all the credit in the world. I lost to a better coach that day, and our players deserved a little better.
Yeah. It's interesting because now I'm looking at that. You're right. You're multiple goal games, the 6-7 games that you won. You had the 2-1-0 games against E-Town and York, which I can, I get. And then you go Catholic Muhlenberg, where you only win one, then you lose to Scranton, and then you're back to Drew with 1 goal.
You just named every game that I've looked at so hard since the season ended. I've just been kicking myself, to be honest.
Yeah. Like, you're right. Like, maybe that was the time, right? Somewhere along any of those 4 games was the time to, like, revisit. But you're right. It's hard to do when you're like, oh, we still won 1-0. We still won. We still got the W. That's interesting. Oh, I can go down.
You know what my biggest regret is? This group I had this year was among the best teams to do it with, looking back. I don't think I didn't do it because of that, but looking back, one of the advantages we had with this team was this is among the most coachable teams I've ever had. I had, no kidding, 7 players playing completely out of position from what they were used to, based upon injuries, based upon changing of shapes, based upon just where our talent versus where their positional comfortability was.
Yeah.
We had wings playing center mid. We had outside backs playing striker. We had wingers playing striker. Like, we had all kinds of things, and they accepted it through and through, no question. Well, they questioned the shape change the day of Christopher Newport. But that was so long ago, they sort of accepted it, Like, they were just like, wait, you want us to change now? And I was like, trust me, That's a tough sell. But, arguably our best attacking player was playing target striker, someone who loves to go face-to-face, 1v1, take it on the wing, and she's posting up all season for the first time, and she's doing it without question, This was a team that I think could have handled that little change. It wouldn't have had a lot, but that little change that we should have done, later in the season.
It could, right? Like, just psychologically, maybe it re-energizes the team, right? Because you're playing like this grinding schedule and maybe you change something up, not so much for the change, but just to sort of re-energize them. Hey, something new, and this is how we're going to do it, and it gets them. And maybe who knows what the results will be, but does it get you more goals? Does
Yeah.
it make you a greater threat? And against Scranton, does it put you in a position where you're more aggressive? I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts would have been, but
No,
or
you're
what your
you're you're
changes would have been. But
you're
yeah,
saying out loud what I was thinking, to be honest,
yeah,
and what I
yeah,
talked with my assistant coaches. And I don't think it was like it could have gone the other way, right? Just
yeah.
like a lot of
No,
those games,
totally. Yeah,
just like changing the formation could have been a disaster. I think soccer is this very unique sport where there's so much attrition. There's so much like experimentation. I always, whenever I have players who are a little down on themselves after, I call them mini failures, where it's like you take a shot and you miss, and it's like
yeah,
the best players you've ever heard of on the women's and the men's side, all the way up to the highest levels of professional, are, if you want to look at it that way, failing so much of the game before they succeed.
yeah,
You look at someone like Rose Lavelle, who I consider to be one of the more creative attacking
yeah, yeah.
women's soccer players I've ever seen. She gets
I'd
stripped
argue. I would argue she's one of the best we've ever seen.
ever.
But
She's so talented
yeah,
and she's so creative. And the best part of the way she plays is she's adventurous, and she
yeah,
really, she'll try a move, get stripped at midfield, get turned into a counter. She tries it 5 more times, and on the 5th one, that's the breakdown that draws
yeah,
the center backs to her. That's that slotted ball that she plays through, and they score. Like, I need our team to continue to play that way, and I think
yeah,
if I really want that from them, I need to be a little bit more like that sometimes. I'm such a defensive first coach, I always have
yeah.
been, that sometimes I find myself just being a little too keen in on that, and I need to continue to allow my players to be adventurous and push themselves, and
That-
if they're gonna see it from the top down, then myself and my assistant coaches really need to exemplify that we're willing to be a little adventurous as well.
Yeah. That's the courage part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like have the courage to do this stuff, knowing that. And I think some of it's probably cultural, right? We don't like failure, and and I think probably every player has experienced that you make a mistake on the field at some point in your soccer journey, and you get yanked, right? Like, which is like the worst possible thing that could happen, because then that gets burned, and whatever that mistake is burned in your head. It's no longer just something that could be fleeting. And
Yeah.
so I could totally see that. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Um, Let me. What do you think? You went, like I said, you went 14-5 and really successful. Some great soccer, and the conference was really interesting. The landmark was really interesting when just battle. We're there to battle and make these things a lot more difficult for others. But what are you looking at the fall, and sort of what things are you in your head thinking, oh, this is something that we need to work on?
I mean, being more creative in the way we attack. We're very meat and potatoes in the way we attack. Sometimes it's a little too kick and runish for my liking, but we've got the players to play more creatively. We're going to have to release players out of the midfield to play either as a second striker or much more attacking minded. We're going to have to, if we're going to stick with our current shape, be a lot more dynamic in some of our off the ball runs.
Yeah.
Just so much of our offense was created by frustrating teams into turnovers and then we them on the
And
counter.
then galloping.
Yeah, and we had the depth for that. We had the speed and the work rate. We scored a lot of goals on set pieces, and one of the players who scored them was the girl Marley, who just graduated. So we have some work to do there. I also think we need to reinvigorate the players who turned in the success this past year. It's hard to do that. I've never been lucky enough to have coming off a multiple conference championships in a row or anything like that, or even a national championship, nothing like that. But I can imagine those teams, when they have success in what they do well, that's the hardest thing to keep sharp, because it always seems they can just be relied upon, right? It's a switch that can be flipped.
Yeah.
And the thing that my assistant coach, Ange, always said this year when we were at our best was we were relentless. The 11 players on the field were just absolutely relentless. I've never seen players run so much and so hard to be in as good a shape defensively as they could be constantly. That's something that can get lost a little bit if you all of a sudden tinker to go offensive in your shape, right, in your tactics to release them. You can't let go of your bread and butter. For us, was really frustrating teams when they get into the middle and defensive third of the field. So how do you balance asking them to be more attacking minded while still demanding out of them the defensive discipline? It's a hard thing to convey. You have a vision for it. You have 10 days of preseason before you go and you play. I don't even know what Misericordia is going to be ranked, but it's going to be top 5 in the country when we head to their place to play them this year. How do you convey to them that throughout preseason and the 2 scrimmages you have, that you're set and that you got it and that you still have things to work on, but like you're good for that first game when you've asked them to change where they saw their success being? That's hard to do, and I think
it's totally. That's like secret sauce stuff. Like if you could capture that, man, you're ahead of the game, because it is like the key motive. Like, how do you get these girls motivated and confident in that what they did 8 months ago, and sort of the build up, and all the work is leading them to now you're at this level. You got this, right? And you go into a game like Misericordia with all the confidence in the world that that's a game you could take.
Yeah, and it's a balance too, because you also don't want them to think about last year too much. You don't want them thinking, because it's a new team. We only graduated 2 starters out of last year, but one of them is an All-American, right? And one of them was a senior leader who on defense, but it's still going to be different, especially if we change our formation up a little bit. And you don't want them thinking, well, at this point last year we were this record and we had this many shutouts. Like you can't think that way. But you still want them to be confident from last year. So it's threading that needle with a team that we're lucky enough to be a lot of returners. But like that same, I want them to remember the confidence they had. I don't want them to remember the specifics. If that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
It's hard to measure that.
It could go both ways too, right? Like you don't know what sits with them more. Was it the fact that they were 14-5? Was they that great and had a great season? They beat, they won these games, or I can't believe we lost to Drew 1-0 in the right. Like which one of those? That to set the mind, right? Like,
I mean, I can tell you for certainty, before we started overtime last year against Drew, and I'm trying to push all this stuff out. Your anxiety's already high enough, but I have seniors coming up to me, not directly, but just being like, we ain't going to PKs today because of what had happened in PKs the year before. And I'm just like, why are you thinking about last year? But everyone's human. You know what I mean? It's not like I wasn't thinking about it. I just wasn't going to say it. But that's the beauty of working with young people. It's like my favorite part of it. Like, I would, instead of them all being robots and doing exactly what you say, you have to coach them. You have to mentor them. You have to work with them. You have to cultivate their growth. And it's my favorite part of coaching by a mile is you work with people day in and day out who are asking for you to help them on their journey through college, through soccer, through growing up to the adults, the professionals they're going to be. And as tough as that final game was and the feeling afterwards, the way they interacted with each other this past off season going into the spring season, the energy I feel from this team going into this upcoming, summer off season and then the fall, it's incredible to see how mature and well they've handled that disappointment and how they've just turned it into fuel to push them going forward.
That's sort of what you need, right? Like you need the bar, and they've sort of shown the bar. Look, this is what we can do, and we can do better. And then have the fuel to be like, now we're going to go, what's the next bar up, right? And,
for sure.
That's awesome. I love hearing that stuff. It gives me kind of goosebumps. Hey, I'm assuming you're done, right? I mean, the school's done. You had graduation.
We graduated 2 weekends ago. So last weekend, what was last weekend? Memorial Day? The weekend before Memorial Day.
Yeah. So it's quiet time for you on campus, right?
Comparatively, very, very quiet.
Yeah. You can find a parking space, in other words? Is that...
Yeah, I don't have to knock on some doors and being like, hey, 4 of your players are taking up all the spots. Unless they're my players taking up the spots.
Could you talk a little bit more about the spring? Like, sort of what you were what you were doing, and yeah, just leave it at that.
So I talk about the spring as always being a development more than any other time of year for every individual. It's great to be together as a team, but we have so many players who go abroad every year. So we had 4 players abroad. We have players who do 2 sports, so they're missing the spring as well. And then obviously your seniors who graduated. So trying to like develop your formation formally throughout the spring, plus the first years that are about to come in. You're basically operating with half your team, if that, plus some injuries. So a lot of it's just staying sharp, being competitive. You do a lot of leadership building, which we've done. You do a lot of just seeing where people are at based upon the critique you gave them as individuals after the fall season, what they've done in the off season. You can tell day one what they've done on the ball. How much they've gone into the racquetball courts and hit the ball off the wall to get their touch a little cleaner, to if they've been running and if they've been playing pickup. We can't know that formally in our rule set, but that when you see it, you're like, oh, there's very little rust compared to what I would think, and I think that level's gone up every year. You just between just good players being cycled into the program and how seriously they've taken the off season, our showing on that first day of spring has just gotten better and better every year, and I thought it was good this year. And we had a really tough sort of next season ending injury for one of our players who played a lot of minutes for us this past year, so that was tough. We had a couple players.
So sorry. I hate to hear that of all things.
She's a great kid too, and she'll be all right. She's handling the ball as well as she can, but she was having a really good spring before that, and then we have 2 players recovering, so they were spending most of the spring doing a lot of non-contact, a lot of ball work. So you have that, and then just players who either played a lot and were just really trying to sharpen where they were and get a little bit better. And then what I love the spring for is the players who didn't play a lot in the fall to really give a chance to show, okay, here's why I've individually improved. So much of the fall is a whirlwind. You're spending so much time not really paying attention to individuals as much as you are the team. And then the spring, you really get a chance to see where their individual improvement has come, and we saw a lot of that. We're expecting some players who didn't get as many minutes in the fall to produce this upcoming fall because they showed that they were able to in the spring. Yeah. Some of it was just discovering a new spot on the field they could play. Our spring scrimmage was against Misericordia and Dickinson, so we got to see, and they were like us. They were missing players, for abroad and graduation, but you put your skeleton crews on the field and play each other, and again, if you hold up in those games, okay, it's been pretty good, and you take as much as you can from the tactics, but more or less you're seeing where the individuals have improved and how they hold up against sizable and really good competition. That's the main thing in the spring. And then, like I said, the leadership development, the coming together, the chemistry, all of that sort of morphs into one another to be what you're looking for out of your spring.
Spring interests me because it's pretty clear that good programs use the spring very, very effectively, and maybe more so than others in that the soccer is there, but there's so much more to it, and then in the fall you have this cohort of players who are ready to assimilate in some new folks, and then they become your evangelists and your advocates, or however you want to describe it, in the locker room. Last question for you. Your recruiting class, what's it look like? Is it done? Were you there recruiting at the tournament for this class, or are you already looking to next year?
So next year we're bringing in 5. I would say 4 of them were like recruited players, and one of them is going to be a walk-on who I think has a really good chance to make the team. She came into the mix late, and I think she's a really good kid, and I think can really help us out, if not on the field, as a phenomenal culture builder and teammate. But of the 4 that I would consider recruited players, 2 of them I think have a legit chance to get on the field right away. One of them I think is exactly the kind of player we're looking for along the defensive line. One is recovering from an injury, so we'll see how ready she is. But overall, I think it's a really solid class. We're only graduating 4, We had 2 players who are returning for their 5th year via the COVID waiver.
Yeah, yeah.
Next year is when we're really going to need a large class. We already have 5 committed for our 2024 class.
Wow.
Yeah, and that whole thing is very strange to me still. It's committed is committed, and we're
Yeah.
excited to have them. They've all done their due diligence. They're tremendous players and people, but the timeline just keeps moving up for Division III, and the commitment. Whenever they ask, like, now that I'm committed, now what? I'm like, well, not really anything. This is more for you, and I'm gonna be excited that we have your word that you're coming in, but they can't even apply to the school yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's that. But for in regards to coming to PDA to look for 2023s, if there was someone there, we would take a look. And then there's this transfer portal that's sort of all the rage right now. And if you look into that and you see someone and you want to reach out to them, you do that. We also have a transfer who's coming in. I would call her a first year this year because she was a first year elsewhere. She transferred in, and this upcoming fall will be her first year. So it's really.
Did she play where she was?
She
at?
did. She was at a Division I school. She was playing club. She had a couple opportunities to play Division III. She just couldn't find what she wanted. I think the transition out of COVID and not having her club team together sort of hindered her. Yeah. But she had a couple of opportunities to play Division III based when she decided she was going to transfer. And she's a solid player. She had a really good spring for us. She's a great kid, fit in right away with our team, which is not easy because you have this contingent of players who had the entire fall to get to know each other. But going back to your question, I just think this 2023 class is going to have the benefit of, despite being small, all being really great people, great character. That's the number one thing we look for. We look for character, we look for high-achieving students, and then we look for tremendous athletes. And it is in that an order of importance for us. And all 5 of them really exemplify that. And, 2 came into the mix really late. We really swung for the fences on some high-level recruits, and a lot of them said no and are heading Division I and Division II and some really peak-level Division IIIs. So we knew that was a possibility, but we're really excited for this group. And what's great for them is, if we're going to have 34 at preseason, there's 29 returners who are all going to be there as sort of this incredible contingent to walk into.
Yeah. Swinging for the fences on some recruits isn't bad, especially the way things are now, right?
Yeah.
Like, they might have said no now, but hey, next year, the way kids are moving around now, you never know if they might, I'm going to go to Susquehanna now because it makes sense for me now for whatever reason, right? So
I mean, you can't go into it thinking I say swinging for the fences because of where they ended up more so than the process.
No, I get that. Yeah,
but you every time you have a kid on campus, you think, okay, now we have a chance to get them, right?
Yeah.
You start if they come to campus, at minimum they're interested, and if they leave campus and have a good experience and stay in contact, you're really in the mix.
Yeah.
And if you are coming in second or third to these elite Division IIIs or D2 or D1s, you tip your cap and move on because if it wouldn't have mattered if they had said yes if we didn't think they were of high character. But if you have the opportunity to be close at grabbing some of these kids with that cultural addition to your team as well as unbelievable on-field play, the ones you do get, you'll be excited about for sure.
Yeah. Very good. Coach, I said, hey, 20, 30 minutes, and look what happened. Here we are.
We get to 38. That's my fault. I'm a talker. It's my fault. Good. I appreciate it.
Hey, this was a great. I really enjoyed that. I appreciate the thought that you have in the game and your program and thinking about things that I look at. Like I said, the 4 games that you went, all of a sudden you weren't getting the production and goal. That's an interesting turn of how it all worked. So, thank you very much as always.
Thank you.
I will send you an email with when I track down that assistant referee. And
that's perfect. I really want him working our games.
Yeah. Free gear gets you calls. That's what I heard about this guy. He was asking for donuts at one point from the parents.
I'm gonna go into our equipment room right now and look for look for your size.
Yeah. Hey, this was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Really do appreciate it.
I really appreciate everything you do, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. If you like this show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also find me on anti-social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks. This is a message from my Chief Marketing Officer. I think this keeps him happy.